Bismillah. Welcome to the Living the Wisdom of the Quran podcast, compiled by Mir Ali Shah. Think of a time you tried to gently guide someone. You reach out in private, then out loud, patiently, over years. And every single time you try, your effort only makes them pull further away. It is a very specific, quiet kind of exhaustion. That exact exhaustion is perfectly captured in Cluster 2 of Sūrat Nur. The public sermon has ended, and we are now eavesdropping on an exhausted prophet's private report to God. This matrix shows the absolute completeness of his effort. He exhausted every possible approach. He called them by day and by night. He spoke out loud in public and whispered to them in private. No combination was left unattempted. A message can fail even when the messenger does everything right. Sometimes perfect persistence is exactly what drives the sickness even deeper. Psychology suggests a reason for this failure called psychological reactance. When a person feels their freedom to choose is being pressured, they instinctively push back to reassert their autonomy. The harder someone is pressed to adopt a position, the harder they dig in. Classical Islamic commentators observed this exact tragedy in the text centuries ago. They noted an inversion where the call meant to draw the people near actually became the threat they fled from. The medicine itself worsened the disease. The Quran describes the physical extremity of their reaction. They literally jammed their fingers into their ears. Economists refer to this reflex as information avoidance, expending real physical effort to avoid learning something because the knowing would demand an uncomfortable change. Then they took it a step further. They pulled their garments over their heads to actively hide their eyes, avoiding the messenger entirely. Beneath these blocked senses was an engine of pride. When a message threatens a person's sense of themselves as right or competent, the ego treats the correction as an attack. It mobilizes arrogance to defend the person's self-image. Being pressed to move is part of what dug Noah's people in. Confronting a stubbornly held belief with evidence often fails because the pressure itself acts as a hardening agent. The Sufi mystics read this passage as a mirror. For them, Noah is the outward face of an inward drama. That drowning, stubborn nation represents the part of our own soul that resists God. The image of fingers in the ears symbolizes the soul's refusal of quiet reflection. It represents the ways we fill every silence with noise to keep divine remembrance at bay, avoiding the still moment where we might actually hear. The people veiled themselves using their familiar garments to create their own darkness, an internal barrier rather than one imposed from the outside. This mirrors our spiritual condition. The veils of the heart are woven from our everyday habits that eventually harden into walls. Nothing hides us from the divine as effectively as the habits we have grown comfortable wearing. We wrap ourselves in these narratives precisely to avoid the discomfort of obligation. What do you do with the grief of total rejection? The human instinct offers two toxic options: swallow the ache until it sours, or vent your bitterness until it wounds others. Noah models a radical alternative in his opening word, Rob, my Lord. He directs his disclosure entirely upward, bypassing the impulse to curse his people or vent his bitterness toward them. The tradition calls this adab al-shakwa, the etiquette of complaint. It is the spiritual discipline of taking your grief, unedited and whole, to the only one capable of bearing it. Modern research into emotional disclosure suggests this practice is healthy. Putting a painful experience into words for a receptive listener produces measurable, significant improvements in long-term well-being. True spiritual patience is the active, healthy discipline of redirecting your ache toward the divine, rather than a stoic denial of pain. Here is a practical exercise for the next 7 nights. Take your heaviest interpersonal burden, the person you have tried and failed to reach, and speak the ache out loud to God. Name it fully. This practice shifts the weight inside you. It places the burden somewhere it can actually be held, regardless of how the other person responds. May we be granted the gentleness to be taught,
And when we are left unheard, may we have the wisdom to lift our aches upward, whole into his hands. Amen.